Hi everyone, and welcome to another Eighth Wall live learning session. This is our live webinar series where we invite developers to come join us for an interactive session of tips and tricks related to Eighth Wall web AR development. If this is your first time here, during these sessions, we'll talk about what's new at Eighth Wall. Then we dive into a relevant demo or topic. Finally, we open things up for live Q&A. If you do have any questions, please enter them using the Zoom Q&A window. The session's being recorded and it's going to be posted on YouTube as well as emailed to everyone who registered. But before we jump into today's content, some quick introductions. My name is Tony. I'm the Director of Technical Operations at Eighth Wall. Once again, I'm joined by Rigel, who's our lead product designer. So it's very likely you've seen us or interacted with one or both of us through our developer Slack channel. If you're not already a member, please do sign up at eighthwall.com/Slack. There are now over 3,000 members. It's a great place to interact with the Eighth Wall developer community, ask questions, and share what you've created. So between the two of us, Rigel and I have worked with thousands of web AR developers. And our goal here is really to pass along some of the tips and tricks we've learned along the way. We value developer input. So if you do have any feedback, questions, comments, feature requests, things like that, please reach out at any time. With that, we're going to jump right in. I'm going to go through a quick update on some new things, and then I'm going to turn things over to Rigel, and he's going to go through today's topic, which is image targets. So let's jump right in. So stop sharing my screen here. So today's session today's what's new isn't specifically a new feature or project per se, but really more of a what's been happening on our Slack channel a lot recently. I wanted to talk about a few topics. One of the hot topics has been project splash screens and loading screens and what can be done to customize that. So I want to spend 1 or 2 minutes talking about that here today. So let me show you a quick demo of what these look like. So if you go to, again, our project library and you pick any of the projects, you can try a live demo. So when you open up the page, let's pull up the page here. The first thing you're going to notice right now is this big Powered by Eighth Wall splash screen. And that faded in, lasted for about a second or so. That's what we call the splash screen. The splash screen can't be customized, but if you have a commercial project, it can be turned off. Now what you're looking at is what we call the loading screen. So this is the screen that's presented, while you're waiting for the user to grant camera permissions and sensor permissions, things like that. So depending on the OS of your phone, if it's iOS 13 or newer, you might have this motion sensor prompt if SLAM is enabled. So we'll continue, and then we've got the browser prompts, and I have the spinning circle, I have the dark background, I have the camera icon at the top. These types of things can be customized. So that's kind of the default loading screen. And now I've got my experience here, and I'm tapping and placing trees. So okay, that's great. So now how can I customize this? So if you haven't seen this, we have a section in our documentation called Customizing the Load Screen. And we've highlighted, there's a couple of different ways you can customize it. The screen on the left, this is the default loading module. The screen on the right, this is that iOS 13 and higher motion and orientation prompt. And if you look below, we've kind of highlighted and labeled these different sections and different pieces. And there are IDs and CSS classes that you can target if you want to override these and just make a couple of quick changes, like swapping out the image, changing the background colors, and things like that. If you're working with an A-frame project, it's even simpler. We've added some parameters to the XR Extras loading module where you can just set a hex color or an ID of an image or things like that. So let me show you what that looks like in real time here. So I have a project and I've got the XR Extras loading module. Just on the previous project, we saw what the defaults look like. And here I've got XR Extras loading. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change basically all 4 parameters. We're going to set a new background color around the loading icon. We're going to change the background color at the top, that top bar. I have a new load image, which I've pointed it at the ID of my image called my custom image. And that's just here. I'm replacing the circle with the Eighth Wall logo. Then in body, I've created an image tag under my asset section, and it's called my custom image. And here's the path to my 8w-logo.png. And then I reference it up here. And then by default, the image animation is going to spin, but you've got options like pulse and things like that. So there's that. Now that first prompt, the motion orientation prompt, I also want to override some of the CSS classes. So I have an index.css. These are the classes that are referenced in the documentation. I've just changed the colors here. So green and yellow and things like that. And then I'm importing my index CSS here in app.js. So let's preview this. I'm going to bring up the camera, scan my QR code here, and here we go. So again, this is the default splash screen. For a commercial project, it can be disabled, but you'll notice with just a few minor changes, I now have a different background color. I've changed the color of the text and the buttons in this motion and orientation prompt. And once I get rid of these camera prompts, I can see I've got the 8th Wall logo here behind, and it's pulsing instead of spinning. So again, this can be as simple as a minute or two worth of work to get a customized screen here, loading screen. Now, if you really want to get fancy and you want to customize it even further, the XR Extras library is open source. All of the source code is available on our GitHub repo, and you can certainly download all of that code and create your own fully customized version of XR Extras. But if you just want to change a few things, images, colors, and that type of thing, it really is the fastest and easiest way to just override some of those parameters. So that's really it for kind of what's hot and new on the Slack channel here over the past couple of days. And with that, Rigel, why don't I turn things over to you, and we're going to talk about image targets today.
Awesome. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Great. So like Tony was saying, I'm Rigel. I'm the product designer here at 8th Wall, and I've spent a lot of time thinking and working on image targets. So if you have any questions about image targets, feel free to ask at the end, or questions about anything. You can be thinking about that now. But what I wanted to talk about first was sort of what's really great about image targets and how best to implement them within the full stack of AR, capabilities that 8th Wall offers. So as some of you might know, we actually launched 8th Wall Web without image targets. It was markerless only initially. And, we had a lot of questions early on, a lot of requests by our customers to add image targets. And so we put a lot of thought into exactly how this would be implemented, knowing that we already supported markerless. And so it was an important decision early on that we would be able to run both at the same time, and that this would allow for all kinds of interesting interactions between the world that you're walking around in and the targets themselves. And so initially we supported flat image targets, and then most recently we introduced curved image targets, which includes both cylinder objects and conical objects. And that's conical as in the sort of coffee cup sense, but also an inverted lampshade type shape as well. And of course, as you're walking through the world, you begin to notice there are actually a lot of these shapes. And they're highly ergonomic, which makes it really fun to just, hold in your hand and use your phone in the other hand to move around. It's a lot more tactile a lot of the time than what you'd find in a typical flat image target, which might be a poster or the side of a building or something, which is forcing you to move around. And so the idea of being able to mix and match not just SLAM and image targets, but also all types of image targets at the same time, right? This can lead to some pretty creative use cases. But I wanted to highlight, before I jump into the how we're going to do this, I wanted to highlight the most recent, and I believe the first commercial example of curved image target tracking, which uses...
or a big old chain. Stay true to yourself, and things will change. Mr. Dog himself has his own wine through 19 Crimes, and
if you have a chance to check it out, it's a great wine, but it also is the first example of using WebAR, curved image tracking, in a commercial product. And it's a really fun experience. You can, ask him whatever you want, and then he'll give you this really fun answer, which is always unexpected, whatever he says. And so that's sort of like the idea here is like with curved image tracking, it's a way to bring your products to life. It's a way to add context to objects, and you can even mix and match the real world along with it. So, so you can kind of see, this is like some of the examples. If you've been to our project library, or you've cloned one of these curved image target examples, you'll see, I have the objects in front of me. You can print out these or use your own image targets and wrap them around different curved objects. And I'll show you how to upload that in a second. But I wanted to highlight some of the things that you can do with this. And, I'd mentioned mixing SLAM with image target tracking. That's super interesting. This cup example you see here, what's essentially happening is we're taking the position of the curved image target. We are aware of where the ground is with world tracking, and then we're spawning these objects in world space, right? They're not children of the curved image target, but in fact exist in the SLAM world space, but we're spawning them at the point in world space where the cup is being tracked. And then we have colliders all around the cup itself. And so, gravity is taking over. We have a physics engine running. And so you can do really interesting things like this. Here's another example with a flat image target. You may have seen this one where you tap on the coconut tree and hit the surface. We have like a virtual shadow here, but you can see there's even like a real shadow of the paper. So it's sort of the blending of realities. Here's one where I'm measuring the distance between where the cup is positioned in 3D space and where the surface is. And so there's a threshold where when the cup meets that threshold between within the distance, it will trigger this animation, and it will decouple the character from the object that's being tracked. And then, just basically is no longer, that relationship between the object and the cup is just no longer a thing. And so that allows us to position the elements on the surface now. So, and then this is the actual example project. So you can actually clone this one right now. If you go to our project library and you click on the first project, it's Curve plus SLAM, and it does the same thing. It measures that threshold, and whenever it tracks it or detects that it's there, it will spawn these pumpkins, and then you can see that the pumpkins exist in world space, but there's a point light attached to the object that's being tracked, and that's how you get these cool dynamic shadows as they're moving around. But image targets are more than just these sort of interesting creative things. There's also a lot of practical considerations with scale. And by scale, I mean the sheer number of image targets that you can support in any given project. So we have a limit of 1,000 image targets per project. And no one has gotten even close to that yet, but I challenge you to do so. And what I mean by 1,000 image targets uploaded is when you go through the upload process, which I'll show you in a moment, you'll see a page of image targets. You can just continue to upload. Now, that doesn't mean we can track 1,000 simultaneously, but we can track up to 10 simultaneously in a set, and you can swap these sets dynamically at runtime. So if you go to our project library, Endless Image Targets is a project that shows you exactly how to do this. And essentially what's happening is we have all of these different images of birds, and you basically scan in and you track each one of these, and it'll do a thing. It'll like give it a label. And when you get to the 10th bird, what essentially it does is it loads the 10th bird and the next, 5 birds in the next set. And so you can sort of continuously, bring in more and more sets of image targets. So if you needed to support 1,000 image targets, you can use triggers to load in new sets. And some use cases for this would be like if you had a book where it's a linear book, you're getting to the end of a chapter, it loads the images for the next chapter. You're walking, outside, and maybe, you're using geolocation and a geofence to trigger the next set for a building that you're passing by versus the previous building you were just at. Or even, you know, in this case, where you're using the last image target in a set to load the next set could be useful for maybe you're at an art museum and you're walking and you get to the last image of the tour and it loads the next room. So there are a lot of opportunities here to be creative and expand just the sheer number of image targets you'd like to support in your project. And that's pretty cool. Oh, and so that's with 10 simultaneously if you have world tracking disabled. If you have world tracking enabled, that of course uses more processing. So the limit is 5. But you know, and you can also fit all of, if you can manage to fit them all on screen simultaneously, right? Like in the same frame, you can track them independently as well. So it's another pretty interesting thing you can see here with the different images that are being detected. Even some that are barely even visible, it's still finding them and tracking them. So, I encourage you to experiment with endless image targets. That's definitely a cool use case. And another little known fact is that during the upload process, I'll highlight this, but you can even store metadata inside your image targets as you upload them. And that can take the form of just plain text, or it can be a JSON, a structured JSON snippet. You can add whatever you like. And in this case, what this project does, the art gallery one, is it actually reads into that metadata that's being stored and delivered at runtime. And you can, it's like rendering a description of the painting that you're looking at. So I encourage you to check that out. This is what that metadata looks like from within. And then lastly, before we get into the demo, I want to talk a little bit about what makes a really good image target and sort of things to avoid. So, you can see down here, we've got a logo, 2 logos, right? One has a highly detailed, non-varied background, or highly varied background, sorry. This is really great for our image target system where it has so much detail to parse out. It's highly unique, and this, however, doesn't have a ton of detail, so it's more difficult to pick up on and keep track of where it is in space. And so what you really want to do is go for stuff like this. Now, I understand that this isn't always like, the customer or your client is coming to you and you're like, we need to track this. And there are ways of improving that. And so one of the things I might say would be, let's say that this gets applied to a box or something. Well, take a picture of the box, right? Don't in diffuse lighting in a situation that would be transferable to other situations. But that's actually more useful to the engine than it is if you had just used an SVG image or something like that. Because remember, when you're pointing and do it with your phone, because when you're pointing your phone at something, like that's the exact data that we're using to determine where that thing is. So, so that's sort of like a good trick. Repeating patterns is also something that can trip it up. So you want to use variety in your patterns and not try to have it so checkerboardy, right? Cool. So for the demo, I wanted to show each of these different types of image targets, but more importantly, show you how to upload them. So especially with the new types. So essentially here, I've cloned our curved image target example. And what I'm going to do first is upload these image targets. So I have a folder on my desktop called image targets. And I'm going to show you each of these. So this one is an image I printed out and applied to a box. And I wanted to point this out that I took this photo with my phone. So you can see when I zoom in, you can see the sort of texturing on my printer paper. And then this is the sort of thing that's important. It's useful that, you can get as close to the real thing that you're tracking as possible as your source image. So, so that's the first one for flat. And then we've got coffee sleeve. So this is actually a cropped, it looks like for real. And in fact, if you want to clone the project, inside the README for the project, is a link to a to either a letter or A4 size image. It's a PDF document. And if you print this out, you don't have to or anything, but if you want to, it comes with a little ruler, and it also has these images. So if you want to print them out and wrap them around something yourself, but you can. But I wanted to show you is the shape of this, right? So conical is unique in that you know, it's sort of it's expecting what we call like a rainbow image, right? Where and this is what it would look like, you know, when someone sends something off to manufacturing that has a conical shape. And so what you're going to use is like the source image for this, you know, rainbow shape. And then what happens here, where's it go? Okay. What happens is we're going to actually define the arc of the top and the bottom, and that's going to determine the coniness of our conical object. And so, and I'll show you what that means later, but this is, I just want to show you, this is the thing I'm uploading. It's just I've just lobbed off the sides of that other one I just showed you. And then for the wine label, you know, same deal. This image, again, was a photo I took of the label itself with my phone. It was not the original source image. So cool. So I'll keep this sort of over here. And we will upload each of these. So the first one is flat. Pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to drag and drop my flat image target in here, hit next. So all of these have this thing in common as well, which is setting your tracking region. And this is something that's been around for a while with flat image targets, but you know, still carried over with the curved ones. And it's essentially this idea that like you can upload any image target you want to, but what the device is looking for is going to be what you set right here. And this is what we call your tracking region. And what's really critical about this is that, you know, you don't have a lot of dead space. What you're really trying to do is zoom in on like the most highly detailed part of your image, and then have that be the thing that you track. And it's one of these things where there are trade-offs in like how you decide this. So you'll want to understand like why this is important, right? But dead space is very bad for the engine. It'll be using resources looking for things that don't exist. And so that's part of the reason why like you want to be able to, you know, look at your label, and everything should, and typically does, have a very obvious point where you'd like the user to point their phone at. And so, you know, in this case, it's like this part almost unedited is pretty perfect, right? I mean, you've got a ton of detail down here. It's all quite varied. And so I'm going to go ahead and create this and set the tracking region to be this area. You'll also notice that it's 3x4. If I had clicked this, it would go into 4x3. And this is important too, that like your tracking region will always correspond to one of those two aspect ratios. Why? It's because your phone is oriented that way. It's because the sensors are oriented that way. And our engine is optimized for detecting things at that orientation. So let's say you have something square that you need to track. That's fine. Upload the square image target, right? And then just make sure that the tracking region corresponds and conforms to that aspect ratio, 3x4, 4x3, and it'll be fine, I promise. So the last part here is, you know, you can change whatever you want to call this. This is important because this name is then what we're going to reference in the code in a moment. And the other thing is you have this target tester, which I'll show you later, but basically it lets you, you know, test your target out. Oh, here, I'll just do it. I forgot I have this open already. Cool, so I'll scan this with my phone, give it camera access, and then here is my target, right? And this is cool. I mean, it's gonna track a lot better on an actual object than it would on a screen. So you just remember that, you know, you always have that object in front of you. And so that's pretty helpful for just at a glance, getting a sense for the quality of the image target. Okay, cool. So we've got that one. The next one we're gonna do is the cylindrical. So this is gonna be our wine label. I'm going to drag and drop this. Same rules apply. right? I've got to set my tracking region. Pretty easy with this one because it's already sort of that shape. So I'm not gonna crop it or anything or rotate it. I'm gonna create this one. Now you'll see this one will be a little different than the last one, right? We sort of stopped at the last step after the create, but this one, you know, is unique in that now we have this 3D renderer, which is showing us what this label looks like sort of to the engine in 3D space. And we have a couple different options here. We've got a slider where we can modify how curvy the object is, or the label wrapped around the object. And we've also got this measurements you know, channel, which we can slide over into. And you can see it's asking for label arc length and label the total cylinder circumference. And so if you do have measurements handy, so let's say the manufacturer sent you measurements, you can go ahead and dial those in. This is all relative, but you can switch between inches, millimeters. You know, you can modify these things. I think for today, I'm just going to use the slider. I want to show you how that works. So the idea behind the slider is being able to just basically eyeball it, right? Just kind of look here, it's going to save it. And then now you can actually go and test it out. So we'll go into the target tester. Scan this. Okay, so now it's looking for my wine label. And if I'm using my computer screen, you can actually see it's going to want to keep the edges, this box, aligned to the box on screen. That's really important because if you get too close or too far, you can see it changes because the aspect ratios, or sorry, the focal length no longer matches between the virtual camera and this visualizer and the camera that's actually doing the rendering, the Three.js camera in our target tester. So you want to keep that frame if you're using the screen. If you're using the actual object, you can just go ahead and do that. But I want to show you using this one because this is pretty fun. So, so I'm holding it, right? And I'm looking at it, and I was literally just guessing, but it seems fairly aligned. The idea behind this is that you want to see, you can even zoom in and stuff. You want to see if these edges are overextending in any particular way. And that actually looks pretty good. So yeah, so I would then go over here, right, to my actual object. And oh, look at that. So not quite there, right? So what I probably want to do next is just change my label curve so it's not quite as curvy, right? And then now it actually auto saves. So I'm going to reload the page. Okay, that's much better. Because your object won't look like, you know, won't be the exact shape. So change this, take this down a little bit. Great, good enough. All right, and the last one is going to be conical. So for conical, I already mentioned the sort of the coffee sleeve. You would upload this. Now these lines on the top and the bottom, that's the thing that we're actually modifying to align perfectly to the curve of that rainbow. So I have my large arc set. Now I'm going to change my small arc. Boom. Cool. And then, you know, same thing as before, you know, we're trying to set our tracking region. And I think this is probably okay. So, this thing's in the way. All right, create. Great. Okay. And what's kind of clever about this is like, so because we set those arcs, we already know how coney your object is. So we can generate this conical shape based off of just that information. And now it's really just about determining that curve, similar to what we were doing before. So with the cylindrical. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to, take a look at my coffee cup, kind of visually estimate here. I'll test it out. I will point this. Oops. Point this at my cup. Okay, so like way off, right? This needs to be a lot less curvy. Reload. That's looking a lot better. Maybe a little bit less curvy, right? You can see kind of like the edge at the top. Maybe 2 steps. All right, saves, reload. Hide this thingy. Okay, that's pretty solid. You can see it's tracking really well now. It's not nearly as jittery as it was before. Of course, my coffee hands keep shaking. All right, cool. So we've done it, right? We've uploaded all 3 different types. So now I'm going to go to my code. And what we're going to do is basically recreate. I sort of deconstructed the scene that you cloned. So first, we're going to start with adding our assets. So these are things we're going to want to add to our objects. So I have a whole list of A assets here. I'm just going to drop in. So as you know, in A-frame, A assets is the sort of area where you can include things you want to load as part of the load screen. So these would be all of your heaviest assets. That way, they aren't just sort of popping up or having the user wait for certain actions in the scene before these things appear. So, and of course, we've got our various GLB models in here, the beans, the blades, and the text. That's all coming from our models folder. And these are some pretty simple models. And this is what's going to be used inside the coffee cup. So if you remember the coffee blender animation, and that's not all, because we're going to need to add our components that reference the objects themselves or the image targets themselves, and that's going to be our flat, cylindrical, and conical. So I'll start with the flat, our box, and kind of put it down here. Oops, too many. Okay, cool. And so you'll notice here, I'm actually referencing a custom component. So this target video fade, and I'll show you in a moment. We have these other ones called XR Extras components. These are referencing a library that we have elsewhere that you load at the beginning. This was what handles the load screen, the almost there, like, if you open something somewhere that you need to get someone to the right browser, this handles that as well. So, but it also includes like a whole litany of different components for A-frame. And so, we made some handy ones we'll show you for curved, but for now I want to show you how to use a custom one, because this is a question we get a lot is, I like the behavior of one of your templates, but I'd like to customize that behavior more, right? Like you don't want the image target to disappear when tracking is lost, for instance. And so what's basically going on here is this target video fade component, which I nabbed from the Magic Photos example. If you go to our project library, I actually have all of that defined here in this components file. And in here, you can kind of see what's happening. So at the very bottom, this is really important. You see we have these event listeners that have been added to our scene when that object is added, right? The ascene loads, the component fires, and then inside of the init function, which is the first thing that happens when the component runs or is added, it runs this whole function. We add these event listeners. These are 8th wall event listeners: XR image found, XR image updated, XR image lost. And when the image is found, right, that means every time it finds it, it fires that once. Every time it's updated, which means like every frame that we know we were still perceiving it, then we're going to run this whatever function you want to add to the right of it here. And of course, when you lose the image, we're going to do something else, right? So if you wanted to, start customizing the behavior of these image target detection, tracking, losing, you can go ahead and take one of these components from, like I had mentioned, Magic Photos, which is a good one because this is where I got this one from. But you can use this as an outline for sort of adding your own custom behaviors. And you'll see here, right, whenever show image is found, or show image is run, we're playing a video. We are animating in the opacity of the object material. So we're going to fade in with the video as it begins playing. And then this is also really important here. So our object 3D, this is the thing that we're attached. This is the, up here you can see it's this element, right? So this element is a entity. Our a entity is a plane that has a flat shader applied, and the plane, right, basically exists somewhere in the world until we get this detail position. This is coming from XR image found, XR image updated, right? This is the event detail that's being passed in. And this is basically what the engine, right, the eighth wall is providing that object to understand where it needs to be in 3D space. So we're copying the position, we're copying the rotation, and in the scale, right? So all three of these things, this is what makes the magic happen. And then we're turning that switch on to make it visible so that you can actually see what's going on. And then of course, when it's lost, we reset the opacity so that the next time that we scan, it's going to fade back in from 0. And then we are making that visible false. So, yeah, so put that all together and run this thing. And, we should get, hold on, need to scan into my preview window here. So when I scan, I can pull up my console. Okay, cool. So anyway, so you see that, right? It faded in now, our video. And it's going to just kind of loop this video back and forth. It's our flat image target on a box. I can lose it. I can bring it back. It'll fade in again smoothly. So that's pretty fun, right? So that's the easiest one. We want to get more complicated here. So that's going to be our flat image target. The next one we're going to roll in is going to be our cylindrical image target. This is our wine label. And you'll notice here, right, this is using an XR extras component like I was just talking about. This is actually called a primitive because it's an entire tag. And, primitives are great because they're basically like prefabs, right, for custom components. So we already have a component that is probably called like XR extras named image target, but then we have a primitive that sits on top of that that basically attaches that component automatically to this primitive. It's asking for a name, right? Wine label is the name of our image target. And then anything inside of this thing is basically going to be whatever we want attached to its parent. So this makes it really simple for, for tracking any number of different things. And by the way, this XR extras named image target primitive, this works for flat image targets as well. So you can basically just add this to your scene, add your, the name of your image target you'd like to track, and then you can put like a box inside of this or a video, or, you can continue sort of making different things, and it will always track, it sort of automatically tracks to that object just because of this one line. So, so that's like a neat trick. And then inside of here, we have a different one, which is called XR extras target video fade, right? So sounds pretty similar to this custom one. It is, it's like the same logic, except it's the like shortcut version of it. You don't have to import scripts or, reference anything. You can just use this primitive. It's loaded in, all the logic is loaded in with XR extras. And then it's asking for a video, which we defined up here, wine label video. We're referencing its ID, and then we can save and build. And this makes it very, very easy to just get up and running quickly without needing to really modify all too much and not even need to touch JavaScript. So anyway, so same scene. Now we've got our cylinder tracking, right? And as promised earlier, you can do both of these in the scene at the same time. Let's see if I can get them both to track simultaneously. The lighting in here is kind of weird. Okay. There we go. So we got two different videos playing back on two different object shapes. Oh, wait, there's more, right? Because we still need our coffee cup. Can't forget about that. So for our conical object, I'm going to pull that in here. And there's a little bit more to this one. As you can see, I'm going to close this. I have a few different things, but the same structure remains the same, right? XR extras named image target is going on over here. It's still asking for a name, applies to the same rules. Now we'll have two new ones I want to mention here. The XR extras curved target container and an XR extras target mesh. And so I'll go ahead and save and build this, and then I can walk you through exactly what we're doing with this. These are pretty cool, I must say. So the container object is basically constructing, here we go. So here's our thing going, right? So you notice how whenever the words go around, they kind of orbit around the object and then they go behind here and it's occluded. That's because we're actually generating automatically this container, which is a series of different, you know, you can call them A cylinders, but they're 3JS cylinder primitives. And there's one up here, there's one down here, there's several in the middle, and then there's also a circle. There's two circles, one on the underside and one on top. And then they have various materials that, you know, like hider materials that block rendering from different places. But what's cool about these is they're all taking in the metadata that comes along with your curved image target. So this works for both conical and cylindrical objects. But it's sort of great because it means that it can make the thing like a portal. And I don't know if so I did this before. This is kind of cool. So this is using the same container object, right? As the coffee cup is using, but this is just a poster on a coal. So, you know, you can do some pretty interesting things. It's almost like a portal, I guess, but it's like an enclosed portal for curved targets. You can also, you know, sort of run with this, and instead of it being a container, this really could be a portal into a whole other world that exists beyond the container portion. But this is sort of an interesting way to get you thinking about, you know, using these objects to perform these kind of cool tricks. Yeah, so that's the target container. But you can tell it's a little specialized, right? What's really helpful here is going to be this XR extras target mesh. Same principle, it generates a mesh based off of the metadata parameters that come with your curved target. But it's a bit more, you know, universal in its application because you can have this either be, you know, a full geometry, right? So it can go all the way around, or it can be just the part on the front that, you know, that you've uploaded with the label portion. So the label width that only consumes that much of it. You can define the width and the height as basically like, you know, modifiers to shrink and grow the size of the content that you want on it. So in this case, it's this logo, right? So that logo is not part of that container. It's actually attached to a different mesh that's generated from your shape. So, but you can mix and match. You can add these things. You can add them on top of one another. You can animate them, you know, and that's what we're doing down here. These are just 3 different 3D models, and all they're doing is they're spinning them around on their y-axis. And, but, you know, it really adds a lot of, you know, dynamic, you know, motion here, which is really cool to see. So, so yeah. And, you know, you can, like I said, you can still track each of these things. They're all going on in the same scene. And if we wanted to turn on SLAM, you know, go for it, right? So this is a lot, you know, about image targets, but, you know, as you can see, they are dynamic and they're flexible. And you can, you know, change them however you'd like. They can be very small, they can be very large, you know. They're just fun. So anyway, that's image targets. Thanks.
Awesome job, Rigel. Thank you so much. A lot of great content here today. And with that, let's just open things up. We're a little bit over time, but we'll stick around for a couple more minutes because we want to answer your questions. And we'll jump into Q&A here. So if you have any last minute questions, please ask them via the chat. And a couple, let's start off. So are there any low poly GLB libraries that you can recommend? There are a handful. I'm familiar with things like Google Poly, CG Trader. I'm sure if you just Google, 3D models, you can find sites. I don't know, Rigel, if you have any favorites.
Yeah, I mean, we just learned this morning that Google Poly is going to be sunsetting early next year or June, I think, maybe. Don't quote me on that, but that's been a great one. I mean, Sketchfab is great. And in Sketchfab you can see the poly counts and the vertices and how large the files are, so that's useful.
Yep. We have another question about going back to the loading screens. And is it possible to customize it? Does that require a commercial agreement? So two things. The loading screen can be customized by anybody. We have those parameters built right in. The extra source code is available. You do need to keep the powered by 8th wall, the very small powered by 8th wall at the bottom of that. And it's there by default. So it's already there. The first screen, which is the splash screen, that can be disabled when you have a commercial license. It doesn't have to be a custom commercial agreement. You can use our self-service licensing and you can turn that off. We have another question about analytics. What kind of analytics does 8th wall provide? And can I track how many people interact with my 3D models? So by default, we only give you one metric. We tell you and we track how many times has your experience been viewed. And that's because that's a piece of our, tied to our billing. But the good news is we don't collect any other information from that. So GDPR, PIA, it's compliant with all of these different regulations. Now, if you and or your customer want to, you could certainly add your own custom analytics on top of that, Google Analytics or similar, if you want to track more information about what people are doing or things like that. We do have a section in our documentation called Advanced Analytics, and it gives you some examples on, here's how you would add Google Analytics to a project if that's something that you're interested in. And then one other question, the last question I see right now is about the cloud editor. It says, I'm seeing my latest code, but my coworkers aren't when I see them, send them the link. So a couple things. When you saw Rigel click that preview link in the cloud editor, that's really like his private development link. It's taking him to like his local development branch. It's authenticating his device to view that. That's really not meant to be a publicly viewed or externally viewed URL. Now, when you're ready to share this with others, the best way to do that is you would land your changes into source control, and then you would click publish. And when you click publish, then you can publish to a public URL or a password protected staging URL. So if this is something pre-launch that you want to share with others, I definitely recommend taking advantage of the password protected staging features for that. I think that's about it. We have a question about the development community and jobs. If you have projects, you're looking for developers, or you are a developer and you're looking to get involved with projects, this is another reason why our public Slack channel is a great place to join. There is a job board section of public Slack where people can post, hey, we've got a project. This is the type of person we're looking for. Send me a message if you're interested. People will post those types of messages all the time. And another question about XR Extras. Will there be a walkthrough of the entire library in depth? That is a great question and good feedback. And we can put that on the list as a potential topic for a future session. Great idea.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's
awesome.
a growing library of helpful shortcuts. And if you want to get started now, I answered the question in the text, but
okay.
You can go and check out our library. It's fully open source. And if you look for the A-frame folder, and then inside of that, there's xr-components.js that lists out all of the things that I was showing and more.
Great, great. So with that, we're going to wrap up our session here for today. We want to thank everybody for their time and interest in the live learning sessions. We hope they've been helpful. Definitely follow us. We're at the 8th Wall on Twitter. Again, join our developer Slack at 8thwall.com/Slack. And we look forward to hearing from you and seeing what you create with our technology. Thanks, everyone.